Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial, and today we're going to be talking about the awesome automatic 8-inch 55 caliber guns on USS Salem. Salem, like New Jersey, has two plotting rooms, or two sets of plotting rooms, I should say. It seems like that feature is only on last generation battleships and cruisers, whereas earlier generations only had a single plotting area. So this is after plot, and we're seeing some of the fire control equipment that Salem would have been equipped with. Unfortunately, the complete suite is not here, probably because parts were stripped off of these ships while they were in mothballs in the 80s for the reactivated Iowa-class battleships, because a lot of this equipment is the same. Even though the guns are only half the size, it's very similar equipment. So for example, I'm sitting at a Mark 8 fire control computer. This was what would aim the 8-inch guns in surface firing mode. However, the stable verticals for the triggers, the Mark 48 shore bombardment computer, and some other pieces of equipment just aren't here anymore. So for example, you can see the hole in the deck right here where the stable vertical would have been, and you can see all the wiring in the hole in the deck where the equipment in this corner would have been. There's a number of places around here that are missing their parts, and you can probably still see those on whichever Iowa is closest to you. In addition to the Mark 8 for aiming the 8-inch guns, which is what Battleship New Jersey uses for her 16-inch guns, there's also a Ford Mark 1 Able. This is extremely interesting, and the reason we've got two separate computers for aiming this gun is because the 8-inch 55 automatic can be used as an anti-aircraft weapon. And so the Ford Mark 1 Able is used along with the Mark 37 directors to aim against aerial targets. So you can cross-connect the 5-inch directors to what's normally a 5-inch fire control computer and send that solution to the 8-inch guns. You'll notice that this section over here just has a blank plate over it. This is normally where the star shell computer would be. Let me show you one of those. Obviously the 8-inch guns aren't needed to fire star shells because we've got the 5-inch guns for that. So here's secondary battery plot right next door to main battery plot, and here are some of the more traditional Ford Mark 1 Ables with the star shell computers. So these are dual purpose. They can plot a target in 3 dimensions. It's fine for surface targets, but it can also be used against aircraft. And you'll notice on the screen there are dual indicators, one for ships and one for aircraft. One striking feature of these spaces for me is it feels like they're larger than the ones in Iowa-class battleships. Some of that may well be that missing parts would have taken up more of the room, but even without that, it feels like this whole suite of spaces takes up more space, which makes sense. Accurate gunnery is critically important. So as ships progress and you add more sensors, like these were designed with more sensors in mind than the Iowas, they needed more space for all that. One of my favorite features of the automatic 8-inch gun is how you reload them. Not like reload the gun itself, but get more ammunition on the ship. While Iowa-class battleships can carry 130 rounds per barrel, the Des Moines-class cruisers can only carry 150, and firing 5 times as many per minute as an Iowa means that they shoot through that supply real quick. Unfortunately, because they have automatic hoists, they're able to just put shells into the top of the hoist and run them backwards to get them down into the magazine. The problem is moving those shells across main deck from where they're coming on. The armor-piercing shells are 350 pounds, remember. And so in different places around the forward 2 barbettes and back aft here in cruise mess, you've got some of these loading trays that you can see can slot together on the main deck so they can form like a feed tray for reloading ammunition into the gun house from where it can be sent down the hoists to the magazines relatively quickly compared to the Iowas, where you've got to turn the turret specifically and lower them all the way down under the barbette and pass them under and then chain fall them back up. That's not easy. I wonder if future American battleships, maybe Illinois and Kentucky, maybe Montana, might have had similar arrangements to this. We'll never know because no more gun ships were built after the Des Moines class. So now we are in the gun house for an 8-inch 55, and it's remarkably similar in a number of ways to on an Iowa-class battleship. Even though the gun house itself is a little bit smaller, it's more open because they deleted the optical rangefinder that the Iowa's turrets have. Each turret had 2 radars on top that could have been used for local range finding, and they have a Mark III rangekeeper, just like on an Iowa-class battleship. So by installing the radars, that leaves you much more room in here. Unlike an Iowa-class battleship, the gun pits are all one big room. They're not subdivided like in a 3-gun turret, and you need 0 men in there. Access is provided so you can do maintenance on the highly sophisticated equipment, but when firing the gun, your entire gun house, gun crew is here in the turret officer's booth. So, in the historic footage of these guns firing, you can see how these mechanisms are operating, but you can see that there's a cart up forward where the shell comes in and then it rotates around, and then on this side for the powder to come in, rotate around, and the rammer pushes them both in, and then those carts roll back out of the way. The spent casings also eject through here. There's 2 extractors inside the breech of the gun that then kicks it underneath where it can be spit out. And maybe the most interesting difference here, it is a wedge-type breech block that slides up, more similar to the 5-inch guns, to rapidly seal the breech of the gun, as opposed to the Welland-type broken, grooved breech block that you've got to twist into place to seal the breech of a 16-inch gun. So this is a lot of the marvel of the 8-inch 55 automatic weapon system right here. In tests, the Navy says that these guns were able to fire 15,000 rounds without any failures, which is utterly amazing to me for a brand new system to go through on tests. In an age where aircraft carriers are built without working bomb elevators, and I'm still not convinced that the F-35 flies, they got this right on the first attempt. The 8-inch 55 was designed to have 2 separate types of shells similar to the Iowa-class battleships, a high capacity that was about 260 pounds and an armor-piercing round at about 335 pounds. These could be fired up to about 30,000 yards, 15 nautical miles, using 78 pounds of powder in a 57-pound brass casing. The brass casing was a unique design to this model 8-inch 55, the auto-loading kind. Previous American guns were all bag guns like what the Iowas had, and this allowed a faster rate of fire. Now, just because these were the shells that were designed, it doesn't mean that over the ship's service lives they didn't come up with new stuff. Much like the Iowa-class battleships were possibly modified in the 50s to carry nuclear projectiles, so too were the Des Moines-class cruisers. The Army had 8-inch nuclear artillery rounds, and some spaces on Salem were converted to hold similar warheads that could, in theory, be fired out of the 8-inch guns. This is one of those things that the Navy neither confirms nor denies, but the archaeological evidence here on the ship seems to support. The nuclear warheads would be stored in canisters like this in shockproof mountings, and then transported to a special cage where they could be assembled into the base of the projectile and then fired. We talked about the shell. Here's the training powder casing, but you can see the interesting shape of it here. Notice how it bottlenecks down at the top. This is so that the wooden plug, the cork that's holding everything inside, isn't the only thing pushing against the shell when the rammer is loading the gun. As it narrows down, this is now the same 1/8 width as the shell, so that pressure is pushed down onto the brass body of the casing instead of just the cork. And that allows you to really ram this home. And because this is wider than the shell, it's not going to go in so far that it gets jammed or that you over-ram it and cause other problems. And that allows the two extractors to then spit it out afterwards. Now we are in the gun pit for the right barrel of turret 2. And from here you can see a number of interesting features. These guns can only elevate to 41 degrees, which is interesting because 45 degrees is for your maximum range. And they can be used as anti-aircraft guns at long range. But right here you can see the stop, which will allow it to elevate. One cool thing about these, unlike Iowa-class battleships, where you have to return the gun to 5-degree elevation to load, and that takes time, these guns can be loaded from any angle. And one of the ways they accomplish that is having the rammer in a casing underneath of the barrel instead of coming out of the back of the breech. That rammer is what requires us to load the gun at 5 degrees, along with the spanning tray. Well, all of that equipment is just attached right to the breech of the gun. Over here, you can see both the shell hoist and the powder hoist, which bring those two up from their separate magazines and then hit the loading trays that we've already seen up above. And then this tube right here is for ejecting the spent powder casings. Because of all of these mechanisms here, these guns are roughly 50% heavier than the traditional 8-inch 55 caliber guns found on Baltimore and Oregon City class heavy cruisers. So there was some debate when these ships were first built. You're building a significantly larger vessel and you're not adding more armor, you're not adding more speed, you're just adding a 50% heavier gun. Is that worth it? It's an unproven system. Yes, the massive rate of fire that these guns had and the unprecedented reliability of them makes it a absolutely sound investment. It's amazing to me that the automatic guns worked so well on this ship, whereas the very differently designed 6-inch automatic guns on the Worcester class light cruisers were always plagued by problems, and those ships were taken out of service long before the Des Moines class. While the guns are automatic, some features are still manual. So shells are being manually loaded into the hoist, as are the powder canisters 2 decks below us. We'll get there in a minute. However, once they're in the hoist, everything else is unmanned. So, we talk about how the Iowa-class battleships, they use bicycle chains to lock the shells in place so they don't go sliding all over the place. And we show you these things and they're freaking huge. Here, it really is closer to a bicycle chain that's locking the shells in place. Again, you've got room for 150 rounds per barrel, so that's 450 rounds total per turret. And just like on the Iowa-class battleships, they're divided into 2 separate shell decks. So we're on the upper shell deck right now. Just like the Iowas, different sections rotate differently. So this inner area here, where the hoists are, that rotates with the turret. While this shell deck here can be rotated independently to bring more shells to your hoist. The absolute coolest feature of the shell handling process is, unlike on the Iowas where you've got 2 guys just manually trying to roll this thing across the deck, you've got some mechanical assistance here from this device. So, it's 2 guys still. One guy is manning the device, and another guy is back here, gypsy head capstan, just like we've got on the Iowas. Got a rope going through that, going around the base of the shell so that it will pull it with all that weight. But to actually slide this thing where we want it, the deck is greased, just like on the Iowas. But you've got this arm, which has a couple of different points of articulation, so you can grab the shell from right here, and then using that to help pull, because it's up to 335 pounds, you can maneuver it here into the hoist. And once the shell is in the hoist, there is a trigger pad right here that it engages, and that tells the hoist that the shell is fully in there and it can go up. There's a foot right at the bottom that the shell rests on, and that carries it all the way up. So, to actually eject the shell into the hoist, you've got to pull this lever back, and that just kicks it right out of this arm. Then you do that, grab the next shell, and you're ready to go again. And that's how you keep up a rate of fire of 8 to 10 rounds. So we've talked about how you can load the shells back down the hoist when you're onboarding ammunition, or maybe the ceasefire alarm goes off while you've got stuff in the hoist. So how do you get it back out? That's where this highly sophisticated wrench comes in. You can just slip it in there over the nose cone and pull the projectile back out and then move it to where it needs to go. The ship has electrical interlocks that will prevent the guns from firing if they turn too close to the superstructure. But, like an Iowa-class battleship, it's also got buffers here to stop it around the 300-degree mark. If it tries to turn too far, that engages and it prevents the gun from turning any further. Here's the base of the powder hoist. We're all the way down on 4th deck now. Just like on Iowa-class battleships, you've got 2 shell decks and then the powder's at the very bottom. So just like with the shell hoist, we're able to both load powder and send it up or bring it back out. So you can use this lever to open these spring-loaded arms to take the powder out. And just like with the shells, there's a wrench here that you can use to slot that in and pull it out. So for loading more powder onto the ship, the hoist can be run in reverse to bring it down. And then you can use this to open these spring-loaded doors and this wrench to pull the powder out, to pass it back to the magazines. For loading up to the gun, you leave these engaged so that when you push the powder in, it stays in place. You can have this switch to automatic so that when this hits a contactor, it goes up automatically, or you can do it manually with this lever here. Just like with the shell hoist, the powder hoist also has several different slots in it so that you can stack a number of these going up the gun. So much like a magazine in a handgun, you can have things preloaded and ready to fire for those high rates of fire. On Iowa-class battleships, you can load 5 shells in the hoist like that, but you can only ever have 1 set of 6 powder bags on the elevator at any given time. So that slows down reloading for us. Now, on here, these guns have way more in common with the 5-inch loading with the high rate of fire than with the 16s of our ship. So, the powder is coming from over here. This is a pretty similar type of roller door to what we use for our powder, except whereas our powder is all stored horizontally, the powder on this ship is all stored vertically. We'll see that in the magazines in a minute. And much like the 5-inch guns where the shell hoists are 2-position, where there's always one up and one down so you can constantly be loading them, there are 2 positions for the powder inside the roller doors here. So this one's empty. We've just taken the powder out to move to the hoist. But now we can roll this door around and hey, there's one that's already loaded in and we can move it to the hoist. And by the time we're ready to go and we swing this back around, there will be one loaded in the other side. So with the weight and size of this thing, how do you move it? It's closer to a shell than the bags that would have been in old days where you could just pick them up and carry them. So there are carts like this one. Notice there's wheels on them. It's real lightweight and it's got a little lip. So that is just enough to get under there, pick it up, roll it over here to the hoist, and then you're done. And there's a guy just going back and forth doing that. Look at that. The lubricating grease is still on there from when it was in service. And still greasy. It hasn't gotten solid yet. On New Jersey, there's a manual enunciator that rings a bell on the other side to tell them when we're ready to go, and a couple of other instructions. On here, you don't need to manually activate that because you're moving this stuff so quickly. Instead, there's a little color code here. So you notice there's a whole contactor. When the powder goes in, hits that, closes the circuit, and that'll swap this from red to white. Red is telling me that it's loaded on the other side. On the other side, the tag should be in the white position saying that we have removed the powder and to expect this to come around any minute now. Now we're in one of the powder magazines. Depending on the turret, they have 3 or 4 magazines like this to supply powder. Unlike Iowa-class battleships where these are stacked floor to ceiling horizontally, they're stacked vertically, and there's just one bank of them here. So there's a lot of wasted space in the overhead. The powder, again, you're using the carts to come over here, grab your powder, move it over to your roller door. As you empty a bank of powder, you can unpin this, take this whole thing out, get it out of the way, and then move and keep working your way back towards the bulkhead. Like the magazines on New Jersey, we've got a... there's not one over my head. I'm a liar. Like the magazines on New Jersey, we've got a chilled water radiator system in the overhead here to keep the powder from deteriorating over time. So, the Des Moines-class cruisers have probably the greatest naval gun ever developed. The most technologically advanced gunships ever built. If they have a drawback, besides the slightly lighter caliber of their guns compared to true battleships, I would say that it is the number of shells that they carry, with only enough room for 150. Remember, Iowa-class battleships have 130. An average battleship is somewhere around 100. So their 5 times rate of fire over an Iowa does not equate to 5 times more shell storage. So these ships, when they were doing shore bombardment missions, had to resupply pretty constantly, which meant leaving the gun line. And of course, they could resupply much quicker, which was another massive innovation of these ships. But if I have to criticize this system at all, it would be the shell stowage. So, having watched this video, do you guys think that these ships could have or should have had more shell storage? Like, obviously they could stretch them, make a larger design, but that's making a heavier, more expensive ship. And remember, cruisers are already ballooning in size. These are twice the weight of the pre-war tin-clads, the treaty cruisers, and that limited how many of them could be built and limited how long they were operated, to the point that there are very few cruisers left in the world today, and they will, within my lifetime, cease to exist and be completely replaced by destroyers, which have grown in size 5 times compared to their World War II counterparts. So, would you try to redesign this space to carry more powder, or do you think they were fine the way they are? Let us know in the comment section down below. What do you think the greatest naval gun of all time was? I love the Iowa 16-inch 50s, but these 8-inch 55s do crazy things that, despite being only a couple years removed from the Iowas, are easily a generation ahead. And then when we perfected it, we just stopped making ships like this and switched over to missiles. So what's your favorite gun? Let us know in the comment section down below. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, and also from a number of other businesses and private viewers like yourselves. We really appreciate your support. Consider supporting the cruiser Salem. She is the last heavy cruiser left in the world, the last gun cruiser that was built, and really a remarkable museum ship that imagine the restoration work they could do with your donations. There's a link in the description below to do that, and you can support our museum by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Thanks for watching.